He nailed the start, he survived brushes with the barrier, and he stormed off into the night for his first lights-to-flag Formula One victory.
Lando Norris can stop hearing about his starts and start enjoying his finishes for the third time in Formula One. Lando Norris takes the checkered flag, a dominant drive complete.
Well, mate, good job.
An amazing car weekend. Thank you very much, everyone. One of many more. Let's keep pushing.
Welcome to the Marina Bay paddock for F1 Nation's review of a Singapore Grand Prix, which Lando Norris dominated from start to finish. I'm Tom Clarkson, and joining me are F1 correspondent and presenter Lawrence Barretto and Channel 10's Sam Power. Guys, I mean, Lando Norris, I think like I've never seen him before. What do you think?
I think it looked like Lando Norris 2.0. Like, as soon as he got that start and he got it out of his mind that he was able to lead the first lap after starting from pole for the first time.
Massive moment.
I think he was sending a message to the world as he was pulling out second after second after second every lap. Was like, yeah, okay, I might have had some off weekends this year, but this is how good I really am. And I think he just needed to cross that barrier to kind of get it.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that you've also seen Oscar do so well, and as difficult as this is to say as an Australian, but he's also got to answer that side of the garage. He has been sublime this weekend. He has not put a foot wrong. He has dominated sessions, and he was so good in going into qualifying. All he needed to do is just get that monkey off the back with respect to the start, and that sends a message as well. I figured it out, everybody. I'm going to be really hard to beat.
Hang on, who was this message to, Lawrence? You said the world. I'm wondering actually if the message was to Zach Brown and Andrea Stella, because of course we came into this weekend just a few days after Oscar Piastri had driven a brilliant race, let's face it, in Baku, and Lando was, I'm not saying he was the second man in the team last weekend, but was this a message to McLaren?
Yeah, like I said, I think he has to answer that. He has to acknowledge the threat that is Oscar. I mean, Oscar is driving unbelievably well. If he sorts out qualifying, he's going to be an absolute genuine threat. He's so composed in the car. That pass on Leclerc in Baku was world class, and I think he really does have to be conscious of it, and he's done an amazing job to answer it for sure.
But I also think it was a message to himself, because we know how tough Lando is on himself. He gives himself such a hard time all the time, even when he's made the smallest of mistakes. Today, he made no mistakes. Okay, yeah, he clipped the wall a couple of times, but he didn't put it in the wall like George Russell did last year.
He almost did.
He almost did.
He tried very hard.
He kept going, right? He had no fear. And I think Lando Norris, maybe who was worried about himself and was worried about his own talent, would have maybe eased off. But I think it's that confidence from that first lap to build up, to give him the confidence. He's going to look back at this win tomorrow, Tom and Sam, and he's going to look back at it and he's going to think, you know what, I can do it. And I do think there's been moments this year when Lando's not been sure if he can. I think he knows he's got the talent, but there haven't maybe been enough times consistently this year to prove it.
This is a very good point, because there's one aspect to getting your first win. The next thing is getting used to winning. Consistently winning is a massively important part of mounting a championship title fight. If you can't do that, forget it. And so now you've just seen someone put everything together and they feel like it's cruisy. It's not, oh my gosh, I've been waiting my whole life for this. It's like, hey mate, this is just another week. Bring it on.
And the message was also to Max Verstappen. You don't put a second a lap on Max Verstappen unless you're doing something particularly well. And why don't we now get reaction from the top two and our championship contenders? You're going to hear from Max Verstappen in a moment. But first, here's the winner of the Singapore Grand Prix, Lando Norris.
I was flat out. I was probably pushing a bit too hard, so it was definitely not like I was cruising. I was pushing to open up a gap, and at one point I wanted to try and open up a pit window to give myself an opportunity to maybe box at the end of the race for quickest lap if I needed to try and achieve that. Daniel saw that away from me at the end of the race, so yeah, a tough one, but it wasn't easy. The car was not easy to drive, especially on the hard tyres. I struggled a lot more than what I did on the medium, and especially just with the traffic and things, it was a bit harder to manage the second half of the stint compared to the first, but I was pushing, let me tell you. I was definitely pushing, probably too much, hence the mistakes I was making, or the two mistakes I made with the wall. And I think it was more just as I was catching up to the dirty air from the cars ahead, whether they were 3-4 seconds ahead. As soon as it changes from the past 20 laps that I had, you have a little bit less grip, a little bit less downforce, tyres are going away a little bit. just got me out. So it wasn't like a lack of concentration or anything. It was just a bit of a surprise to me. But yeah, I think the car was all good and the car's been mega all weekend. So a big thanks to the team.
Quite quickly almost I realized that it was not possible to follow, and I just tried to do my own race and just keep my momentum going, even though of course it was not the same pace as Lando. First stint was a bit difficult. I had a lot of rear decks, a lot of sliding, and I think that just cost me a lot of lap time. And then the second stint was a little bit more competitive. It's still not of course where we want to be, but I think overall it was a bit more promising. But we still need to figure out of course the base pace, the long run pace a bit more. We know that of course this track is not ideal for us, but I think even on a normal track at this stage we still can't fight them. So we need to bring more performance.
So Lawrence, Lando's convinced himself he can do it, as you were saying earlier. Do you think this is his most complete weekend in Formula One?
Oh, comfortably, because I think from the minute...
Why is it better than Zandvoort?
Because the minute he got in the car here, that very first lap, do you remember, take you back to FP1 when he put the soft tyres on, when no one bothers hustling the car like he did in that session. And he was absolutely on it. The rear end was stepping out. He was just going for it. And he made hardly a tweak to that car from that moment. Look, it's close because Zandvoort was a great weekend. But this weekend, I reckon on a paper, you could probably write the little tweaks that he had made over the course of this weekend. And there was never a moment, and it picks up on what Sam said earlier, there was never a moment this weekend where Lando didn't think, I've got this. I think he honestly think he had the measure of Max Verstappen. And I just don't think he's had that up until this point.
Couldn't agree more.
What about Max Verstappen then? He was very unhappy with his car on Friday. And of course, let's not forget Red Bull come into this weekend after a torrid time at this racetrack last year. I would imagine there were a lot of questions being asked within the garage. So for Max to come away with a P2, albeit a long way behind, but this was as good as Max could have hoped for, I think.
Absolutely. I think when he came into this weekend, knowing obviously that it was the worst race of the year for them last year for Red Bull, he would have known it was going to be difficult. He would have known the bumps, he would have known the curbs, he would have known that this was just an anti-Red Bull track. And for them to find their way through the weekend, firstly, and then to stick it on the front row, and he told me that he had no chance in hell of putting it there to start the weekend. And then for him to be second throughout the race, fend off any challenge, well, he didn't really have to fend off any challenge in the Grand Prix. I think he'll take a lot of heart from that. What he won't take a lot of heart from is the massive gap to Lando around here. And when he was talking in that interview about like the difficulties that he's had around here, he was much punchier about all of the things that are wrong, which he isn't normally like that. So it's almost like he's starting to build a picture about some excuse. Sam, you'll know about racer driver excuses, but like, he was trying to put kind of a picture in place, which made me think for the first time, is he rattled? Is he starting to get rattled by Lando Norris?
Well, I think Red Bull is facing the sheer fact that they do not have the fastest car. They do not have the fastest car in Formula One, and arguably they've done well in this Grand Prix, but Ferrari have been improving in form. We've had Mercedes win a couple of Grand Prix as well. That's a huge mental shift within the team, and that causes everyone to just be a little bit more tense about their decision making, and all of a sudden you start to stretch a little bit, and you can see the internal pressure mounting. And it's all good news for McLaren, because if they're going to do that, that's how they get Red Bull to trip up. That's how they get them to make a mistake. So, yeah, it's
but
tricky.
The thing is, they didn't make a mistake this weekend. They really didn't. I thought Red Bull, okay, they ran the car a bit too stiff on Friday, but they softened it off and it got better. So every decision they made this weekend was a good one. Max Verstappen was flawless, which we've got used to now. So I actually think Red Bull are actually in a good place. I think they're coming out of this weekend thinking we got the most from it. And I put it to you guys that the next 4 weeks, I think, are the most important 4 weeks in the next 18 months of Formula One, because I think the developments that Red Bull are putting together to put on the car in Austin obviously are going to be made over the next 4 weeks, or completed over the next 4 weeks. And I think people are going to start throwing forward as well to 2025 in this next 4 weeks. So a lot is going to be decided, I think, for the next 18 months of Formula One in this gap before Austin. And both McLaren and Red Bull know where they're going. And when we turn up in Austin, what is the new RB20 with its updates going to do?
But I think I think you make a really good point, and I think what we're seeing is the champion team take on a team that wants to be champions. And they are responding. Both are responding to each other. This is now an out-and-out fight between these two teams. They just need to keep pushing and pushing. We know the cars are going to be relatively similar this year. There's still a lot of this that bleeds into next year, and we know that they're going to be going around and they're going to be title contenders. We hope, at least anyway.
But I'm not sure it's the car development that's going to be the difference here. I think it's the Checo factor here, because he's scored 1 point now in 2 races. So it's all well and good.
You're being harsh, though, because he would have finished 3rd or 4th last week were it not for the accident.
True, but like we're just looking at the points on the board, though, aren't we? I guess, Tom. Like, you're right, it's harsh, but I think that like he's got to start delivering. And he made 3 places today in the field. Carlos jumped him. You know, Charles showed the power of going very deep and running late. Look, I'm not having a go at Checo. I'm just saying that I think Red Bull wouldn't be in such a bother at this point or be so worried if Checo had scored more heavily up until this point. I think what they really need is for him to find that kind of form that he showed in Baku and then get the points at the end of the day, because then you're not fighting one car against 2. Who knows what would have happened if Checo was more in the mix, whether he would have stopped Piastri coming back through, which could be crucial in that constructors fight. I just feel at the minute McLaren have got such a great trajectory with their car and their aero development, and it does feel like Red Bull are starting to understand the problems, but then you still hear Max and Checo talking about big steps that are needed, and as long as 4 weeks are, that's probably not enough to make that difference when you've got 6 races in 7 weeks to finish the season.
And to build on that point, the next 4 Grand Prix are all Grand Prix where there's a lot of passing. Austin, Mexico, Brazil, Vegas in particular is where you need that second teammate, because at every pit stop there's another risk of an undercut. If you've got a one-stop race like here, for example, typically, it's a little bit different. But if you've got these multiple opportunities, you need 2 horses in the fight.
Hear that? That's the sound of success with Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform that makes it easy to start, run, and scale your business. Whether you're selling candles or custom sneakers, Shopify has you covered. You can sell online, in person, or even on social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. With all the tools you need to grow, without the need for coding or design skills, Shopify gives you total control. From a sleek POS system to an all-in-one e-commerce setup, you can manage every aspect of your business effortlessly. Plus, with award-winning support and a library of business resources, Shopify's got your back every step of the way. It's incredibly empowering for entrepreneurs, no matter where you are on your journey. So it's time to get serious about selling and get Shopify today. This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/nation, all lowercase. Go to shopify.co.uk/nation to take your business to the next level today. Shopify.co.uk/nation. Well, we're joined now by Will Joseph, Lando Norris's race engineer. Now, we spoke to you after Miami, and we're now speaking after an emphatic victory in Singapore. Just how good a job did Lando do today?
I mean, I think he did a fantastic job, really. You know, I think from lap 1 this weekend, we've been on the pace, and Lando's demonstrated how quick he could be. He's been very comfortable in the car from the word go, and I think we've just built on that. We've tried to make small steps in the car to make it quicker. We've made sure that we've, finished the race in a good position. But no, I think he's been incredible. In the race, we kind of said there were 2 ways it might go. And at the beginning, it became clear that we could sort of push on and just build the gap. I don't think one of us expected the gap to be quite so large. We cleared safety car window, then we cleared full pit stop window. The pace was phenomenal, really.
How surprised were you by the pace?
I think we were surprised just how much pace there was. I think we always thought we were quick. On Friday, we were the quickest at low fuel and high fuel. So, Leclerc was close at low fuel, but the high fuel looked very strong. But, to pull such a gap in such ease relative to Max, who's a phenomenal driver in a phenomenal car, was great.
But this was a statement victory, and after Miami we spoke about what might a victory do to his confidence and things like that. But one of the things we've been discussing on the show is this might be the one. This might be the one that gives him the confidence that he can actually win the World Championship and not just win the occasional race but get on a roll. Are you getting that vibe?
To be honest, I think we saw signs of that after the Netherlands too. You know, that was such a good race as well. I think the nice thing about this weekend is, like I say, sort of just being so strong at an event where we didn't necessarily expect to be the quickest. And, you know, we've put some demons to bed. You know, people can no longer say, well, we can't get out of the first corner, we can't finish the first lap. You know, we've led from start to finish and didn't really put a foot wrong. So potentially you're right, but we don't think about it in that sense. I think I say this to you quite often, which is just take each day as it comes. You know, the next challenge is Friday in Austin. It's a sprint event. Then we'll have Saturday. Then we'll have Sunday. You know, take each step as it comes.
How much confidence did he have before the race? I mean, you mentioned the monkey on his back about the start and the opening lap. Did you sense any nerves, or was he in a different place?
No, I mean, we don't really need to discuss those kind of things. So, you know, we talk about the strengths. We go through how our driving was on Friday, where the opportunities are. But, you know, there's no need to discuss or dwell on things that other people say are a problem that we don't necessarily see. You know, in the factory we'd reviewed race starts, and you kind of go in there thinking you're going to find something you know, special, but actually you come out thinking, well, actually it's not as bad as everyone is trying to make it out to be. And it's just, some things aren't necessary to talk about. We just do our job, due diligence, discuss the things that are in our control, and the results show.
There were those couple of moments against the wall, front and rear.
Yeah.
Did that affect performance at all? Was anything showing on the data?
I mean, when Lando said he'd hit the wall the first time, you know, we do our normal procedure, which is to check everything. And really what you're trying to do very quickly is say, do I have a puncture and have I damaged the front wing? Because if you've damaged anything else, and there's not much you can do about it, if you've damaged the front wing, then you can stop and change it. So you're trying to make that assessment very quickly. And we decided immediately that the damage wasn't severe enough to do anything straight away. You go past the pit entrance, it buys you effectively another lap to look at it. And then when we made the stop, we'd already decided that we didn't need to do anything with the front wing. Did it affect performance? In a very small manner. You know, when we look at it afterwards, we can see that it's scuffed in the data. It's a tiny bit of pressure loss, but it's you know, small, I'd say.
Do you think this level of performance that we're seeing from Lando and McLaren is circuit specific, or when do you look at the last 6 races and go, no, we can repeat this 6 times?
I think the exciting thing is we've demonstrated with the last few races that we can be strong at every type of circuit. Whether or not we will be is a different thing. You know, no one's going to sit there and just let us continue. I'm sure everyone will be going back and scratching their heads and trying to bring developments for the last few races. But we can certainly go to tracks now, not worrying about the type of track. And actually, like I say, it's more the onus is on us just to do the best job with the car we have. You know, both Red Bull and Mercedes demonstrated that after a poor Friday, they can turn it around and have a good Saturday and then a positive Sunday. So, you know, the onus is on us to continue doing a good job. Whilst we consider other people, we certainly aren't worrying about what they're going to do. We just do our own good job.
One of the things Lando said after the race was that he's working harder than he's ever worked. Are you sensing that? You've been with him for such a long time now. Do you feel he's gone to another level in terms of his own commitment to the task at hand?
I think it's fair. It's true. I think you know, over the years we've had to do different things, and where we've had to spend our time and spend our energy in developing and working hard has changed. Now it's on finessing the fine details. It's on things that aren't just pure engineering. It's about preparing ourselves correctly for the weekend, making sure through the weekend we're rested, making sure we discuss the right things at different points through the weekend. So we're changing how we work, adapting it to the situation we find ourselves in and the strengths that we're currently in. Lando's putting in his part, his effort, and you know, I think we're seeing that. I think, this weekend, Singapore can be quite a distracting event. The time zone, the heat, it's very busy, but actually Lando's put in the effort and demonstrated that he can recover and come back the next day having thought about and reflected on what happened the day before, what we've discussed, and develop on the areas that we've pointed are opportunities for us. So yes, I think he has.
And where is this pairing, the Will Joseph Lando Norris pairing? What is it thinking about the Drivers' Championship now?
First of all, I don't think it's a pairing. It's not just...
You work so closely together, Will, and have done for so long now.
We have, but there are other people, part of that team that are doing, just as important, if not more important roles than me. We often discuss this role as the conductor, but there are people playing their solo parts, as it were, to make the orchestra sound fantastic. There are some other very important people doing their bit. So where are we going together? As I said, we're all trying incredibly hard, and the effort that Team Lando is putting in around Lando is phenomenal. The effort McLaren is putting in is phenomenal, both here and back at the factory. Everyone is pulling their weight and doing everything they can to find every last bit of performance in the longer term and in the short term.
And is there belief now that you can win it?
There's certainly a belief that it's ours to fight for. Whether or not we can do it, I don't know, but I keep going back to the same point, which is not focusing on what other people can do or can't do. Let's just do the best job we can do. And if we do that, then what will be will be. Hopefully we come out of it winning both championships, but we'll see.
More weekends like Singapore.
Yeah, more weekends like Singapore. Hopefully we can get some fastest laps. We had it up until the penultimate lap. Hopefully we can get other people taking more points off Max to make our life easier too. So all weekends like Singapore, all better than Singapore. And there's 3 sprints, there's a lot of points available in those sprint events. So fingers crossed.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Let's talk about the second McLaren horse then, Oscar Piastri. I thought he drove a stunning race actually, from 5th on the grid to 3rd. He did as much as the team could have hoped for, really, given that qualifying had been a little bit sticky for him.
I think you're absolutely right. He's finding an unbelievable form. He's everything that he did in Azerbaijan was world class, and he came into this Grand Prix with a similar level of confidence that Lando will now have going into his next Grand Prix. And I think Oscar, once he sorts out the gremlins in qualifying, will be a genuine threat to the top order.
Constructors' Championship, done deal. 41 points between Red Bull and McLaren at the top.
McLaren won't like me saying this, but it kind of feels very difficult to see a world where they don't win, and that's just because both Lando and Oscar are operating at such a high level. They're pushing each other to another level, and I want to pick out those 2 passes that Piastri put on the Mercedes today. First Lewis, then George, round the outside. It was Daniel Ricciardo.
His passing is exceptional,
wasn't it? It was just so bold, and it's been so long since we've seen that kind of passing for serious positions. I think he's got no fear, and I think, like Sam says, once he kind of irons out those qualifying tweaks that he's got to make. Look, it's year 2, so let's not be too harsh on him.
Yeah.
Race 40.
Yeah,
we've got a lot to look forward to, Australia.
And there is so much to look forward to, and I think that is why it's so exciting for a team like McLaren. And actually, I think it's going to push Lando on. I don't think it's going to have the other effect. Don't think it's going to put him down and wind him up and annoy him. I think it's really going to make him step up.
Nice segue into the other Australian on the grid here in Singapore. Now look, Lawrence, you've spoken to him. There's been so much speculation about Daniel Ricciardo, his future. Okay, frustrating race for him, with a little nice ending for him, I suppose, getting that fastest lap, helping Max Verstappen, of course, because that took a point away from Lando Norris in the championship fight. But what vibe did you get from Daniel in the pen? Do you think this was his last race?
It was certainly, Tom, one of the toughest interviews I think I've ever done, because I think with Daniel, he is always, at least with me, has always been very open and honest and genuine when he gives answers. So I think I was asking very open questions, but I think when he was given the answers, he was really being thoughtful about what he was saying, and there's been so much pressure on him in the build-up to this weekend. There was the speculation before he did even step foot in Singapore that he was going to lose his seat after this Grand Prix. He had every journalist ask him about it. Then he had that up day on Friday when he was so strong in practice, to the day in qualifying where it all went wrong. Kind of story of his return, really, isn't it, to Formula One? And so when he came to me in the pen, and I'd seen that he'd sat in the car after the race, and he doesn't normally do it for very long, and obviously really hot in there, so you want to get out as soon as possible. But he was in there for ages. So I asked him, just simply, why? Why did you stay in the car? And obviously that opened some doors, some floodgates.
A lot of emotions because, look, I'm aware it could be it. And yeah, I think it's also just exhausted after the race. So there's so much, I don't know, just like a flood of many emotions and feelings and exhaustion. And yeah, the cockpit is something that I got very, very used to for many years. And yeah, just wanted to savor the moment.
I think, judging by that, I think he knows something. That's an emotional Daniel Ricciardo.
I think coming into the weekend, because we're so used to seeing him smiling and bubbly and bouncy, even on the difficult days, and to see him not like that, to see him troubled, I guess is a good way to describe it, and to see him like that through this weekend, and then see him react like that in that interview, it's difficult to see how he hasn't been given some sort of bad news or enough news that makes him think that it's the end. I think it's the question now, honestly, is whether or not he gets the rest of the season and then Liam Lawson takes over next year, or he has to give up his car immediately. But I'm just doing body language here, and you take that interview, you take the time he sat in the car, you take the way that he had this applause when he walked into the hospitality unit today after he'd done his final interview, the way he's hugging people are making an effort to go and hug him, like people who are significant in his career. It's kind of trending towards that. But honestly, I don't know for certain, but it's trending towards that.
Guys, why do we think it hasn't worked out for Daniel Ricciardo, right? Let's wind the clock back to middle of last year. It was all about, is he going to be the guy to take Checo Perez's place at Red Bull Racing? And it's, okay, of course not helped by the accident at Zandvoort and the broken hand and things, but I mean, I can think of 2 races where he's been very strong this year. 4th in the sprint in Miami, and then, of course, a great weekend in Canada. But when he was at his peak, I thought consistency was one of his fortes, and that is what he struggled with the most. Is it the tyres? Is it the car? Is it the fact that he hasn't had his mojo for quite a few years now? What do you think, Sam?
I think for me, I'd be clutching at straws, but the cars that he drove so unbelievably well in were very, very different philosophy cars. And the 2022 regs that came in are incredibly stiffly sprung, are very flat floored. Previously he's used to a Newey car, which was high rake, quite a lot of roll, so very, very different style. We've often heard about him trying to adapt his driving style. So I would hazard a guess and say that it's probably just a mismatch to the 2022 car and its general philosophy more than anything.
What I think hurts him the most is that it feels like it's always been up against. He's been up against it, and it's always been against the run of play. Obviously, he broke his hand in Zandvoort last year, so he barely got started. Then missed a load of races, and the guy who's potentially going to replace him was the guy who did such a great job. Then he started this year when the car, for whatever reason, wasn't at his comfort levels, but was competitive. Yuki scooped up a load of points. Then all of those moments you talked about, Tom, where he turned it around, the car's gone the other way. And then he's going and getting 11th, 12th, which are good, solid performances, but they're not points. They don't seem impressive. So I think it's just unfortunate that his form has turned around at a time when the car hasn't been up there. Even today, look, Yuki didn't score points, did he? So you could argue that the car still wasn't capable of scoring today, and he's just done the best at what he could do from where he was starting. So I think he just hasn't had the rub of the green, really. But that, many drivers in Formula One are going to leave their careers and say that. But I think that's possibly what's going to take him the longest to get over. That I don't think he's going to feel like he ever had the right circumstances to do that. But right up until the August break, Red Bull wanted him. That is true. Red Bull wanted him to replace Perez. They even had a chat about it beforehand. So what on earth has changed between then? We've had 4 races since then. What on earth has changed to make them flip the other way? Because I do think in that setup, with the number of people he would have known, with a works operation that can just fix things quicker, turn things around quicker, probably identify problems quicker, I think he genuinely felt that. And I honestly think Christian Horner thought that, because that's why he's backed him so hard. So I think for him potentially never going to get the chance to see now whether or not he'll always feel a little bit unfulfilled.
And Christian Horner has gone public this weekend saying that why wouldn't Red Bull look at George Russell in 18 months' time at the end of 2025? And I think is that another dagger in the side of Daniel Ricciardo? Because it's not him he's talking about, it's George Russell, who's outside of the Red Bull family. George Russell is a Mercedes young driver. He was scooped up by them 8 years ago or something, and Daniel's not part of that conversation.
Yeah, it's hard to say as whether or not it was sort of rekindling a little old war between foes there and Red Bull and Mercedes. I think the other thing is that there's so much talent coming out of the juniors right now. Like you look at Franco and what he's been able to do in the car, and it's been utterly extraordinary. So I find it sometimes I find it a little bit interesting that they're not looking at the junior talent in that respect, but
I think
maybe
Red Bull,
they just need someone that is that senior that can go up against Max.
Sammy, I look at Red Bull Racing a bit like Ferrari, in that Ferrari for years never brought on young drivers. Charles Leclerc broke that trend in 2019. For years it was always they would pay the big bucks to get the stars in, and I think Red Bull Racing does that, and it's VCARB's job to bring on youth.
I think if he leaves, Tom, I think there'll be a massive hole, because I'm not saying we haven't got personalities in this sport, but he brought a legion of fans that I'm not sure any driver currently can bring. He was doing had incredible impact in America. We know that the sponsors Visa and Cash App love him, and that was a big part of why they wanted to run him in the first place. But he's a nice, open guy who will always be honest on the good days and the bad days. In his pomp, he was pulling off these great moves that I mentioned earlier, and he was showing that he could be a real great part of the team, so the team love having him around. And I do think that's why they've worked so hard to try and find a way to maybe unlock, I don't want to say the old Daniel, but that first spec Daniel that got everyone so excited at the start. So I think Formula One will miss him hugely. But I think also Daniel doesn't want to hang around if he isn't able to deliver the kind of performances that he knows and genuinely still believes he can deliver.
I think from an Australian point of view, the most amazing amount of effect that man has had on Australian sport in general. I mean, I remember competing within Australia, watching him in British Formula 3, watching him go through World Series, getting the drive in HRT, progressing through Toro Rosso, jumping into the senior team. I mean, he inspired so many of us to try and for an Australian driver to go to Europe is an enormous step. And so he's inspired a swathe of drivers in that respect. He's inspired an enormous amount of his community through Ricardo Kart and what he's done there. So, this man has left behind an incredible legacy, which he can be incredibly proud of. I certainly will be awfully sad to see him go. And with the Netflix area and what Lawrence was saying about his personality, the effect he has on corporate hospitality and general hospitality and fans in and around the sport is going to be sorely missed. And I hope someone at least tries to fill those big shoes.
Well, shall we talk about Russell George, as Daniel calls him?
Russell George, double barrel surname.
George Russell. In fact, let's talk about both Mercedes drivers who actually didn't come and see you in the pen, did they, Lawrence? Because I think they were suffering a lot after what was probably one of the most physical Singapore Grand Prix we've ever had. No safety car, no respite for the drivers. It was just flat out all the way, wasn't it?
It was full on. I mean, for the drivers who did make it to the pen, you could see how shattered they were. Obviously, the sweat is dripping. They've got all sorts of ice packs on. So it was super, super tough. And you would have seen that Lewis obviously bolted on different tyres really early on in the race. So he would have had a really long stint to make that work. And honestly, they've got to get a doctor's note if they don't come to the TV pen. So it would have been significant enough. There would have been a medical reason why they couldn't make it over to talk to the media. So obviously, I hope they're both okay. But it was a tough race for them because obviously they were outperformed by Ferrari, having obviously outperformed them in qualifying. And It was kind of another up and down weekend. I don't know how you guys feel, but it was kind of like another up and down weekend where you kind of don't really know where to place them.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see their feedback. You know, George was quite harsh on the car, but then you look at the distance in qualifying and you look just metrically at the data, and, you know, you're there or thereabouts. You're not massively a long way away. And typically when you're sort of complaining about tyres not being switched on or the balance not being quite right, etc., then you expect to see a bigger differential. So I did find it quite surprising. I think it's probably just down to I think what we're starting to see now is going back to what we had previously in Formula One, where you've got certain teams that are matching to certain tracks, and we're starting to see a little bit of an advantage form for cars under certain circumstances.
Well, I'm going to look at the positives of Mercedes, and I thought to see Lewis Hamilton back in the top 3, because he has really struggled and been very open about his struggles in qualifying, hasn't he? Actually, it's with this generation of car. It's not just this year's Mercedes. It is these ground effect cars that he's struggled to get the tyres into the right window. And he did that in qualifying. And he was really pumped, actually, after the session, wasn't he? You spoke to him.
I mean, he gave the longest answers he's given in a long old time because he wanted to explain why it was so good, how they had turned it around, give the credit to the team. And I think, like you said, Tom, he has been very tough on himself from a qualifying perspective, not really understanding. I think that scared him a little bit, not really understanding why he couldn't do the thing that has made him so famous all these years, which is really nailing down qualifying and putting himself in the great shape. So for him to have said he felt really connected to the car, I thought was interesting. And for him to feel so pumped about today's race, which made me think he generally thought, even if he didn't say it publicly, he could take the fight forward. To then go through the race and essentially fall backwards or not be able to fend off Ferrari would have been tough to take.
Look, can we actually wind it back to the 15-second bell before the start when we see the tyre blankets come off? Use soft tyres? Now, I know...
I thought it was brave. I was like, I was on the grid and I was sweating bullets, and I was thinking, oh boy, that is a brave call.
It is, isn't it? He was the only one of the top 10 to run the soft tyre. I couldn't work it out. Could you work out? Go on, give me a positive reason why they might have done that.
But I think Lewis was confident, and I think that
confident of what? Taking Max into turn 1?
Confident of his own ability to make the most out of this great starting spot. I know that Singapore was always good to him. I think there's the stat he's been in the top 5 for the last 15 Singapore Grand Prix.
I mean, he's all of them. 2018.
Yeah, never qualified outside the top 5 in every Singapore Grand Prix.
He is a god at this track. He is incredibly impressive. I think for me, it's a question. He's on the clean side of the grid as well. You put the soft tyre on. Max is on the dirty side. Max struggles a little bit. Do you give yourself a little bit more chance? Track position is usually quite critical here, even though with the corner changes.
It's only 170 metres to turn 1.
I'm just trying to explain why I could have done it.
We're not at Barcelona here, where we've got a really short run.
But then what was the worst that was going to happen? Because if it just stuck with the medium, which was the same as what George had, best case scenario, he's just going to stay in the same spot, right? Yeah. And it'll be even harder to take Max on that dirty side. Let Max finish the dirty side. If he started on
the medium, Loz, I put it to you, he would have not been beaten by Charles Leclerc.
Interesting. Yes, but still not a podium, though, isn't it?
But maybe, is it all or nothing? Whether Lewis Hamilton finishes 6th or 5th in a Grand Prix, he doesn't care. It's all about getting on the top, getting on that podium.
Probably because I think at this...
Roll the dice.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, I don't think he knows from weekend to weekend what kind of Mercedes he's going to get. So he probably thought, well, yeah, I may as well go for it this weekend because we might go to Austin and I might not be P3 and then I'm slogging it about, P7, P8. And he's actually raced pretty well in the pack, I think, this year. But that's not what he aspires to, is it? He wants more silverware.
And the other thing is that you had 2 out-of-position Ferraris, out-of-position Oscar Piastri, no Perez up there as well. So it's like if you're going to have an opportunity to try and roll the dice, it's probably a fairly good one. The other thing with the soft tyre is that the deg on it wasn't as bad up until a point, and then it really was very bad. So you could run it. It was reasonably competitive towards the medium tyre. So I think that's what gave them enough of a factor in the decision-making to be able to go, I reckon we should do this.
And George Russell?
I think he'd be reasonably happy with what he got out of today because I think he pulled it back in qualifying, having admitted he was shocked to have made it onto the second row. I think he probably expected the Mercedes to be a bit stronger in race pace, because that's been the trend this year, and that didn't kind of come through, did it? And he would have been happy to have held off Charles Leclerc with better traction, but I think he wouldn't have expected to have been in the position where he was having to hold off Charles Leclerc. So I think there'll be a tiny bit of head scratching, but I guess if you look at it overall, they've outscored Ferrari, so that's a good weekend on a circuit where Sainz won here last year. Ferrari should have been very strong. Ferrari looks on Friday like they were going to be McLaren's main challenger. So I guess if you look at it, you were looking for a positive there, Tom, earlier. I feel like that is a positive, I think, for George. And I think when they've calmed down a little bit and thought about things tomorrow, I think they will see this weekend as generally a step forward.
Okay. Whereas in Maranello tomorrow, I think there's going to be endless frustration of what might have been. Charles Leclerc thinks he could have qualified on the front row, but he didn't. And then, of course, we know what happened to Carlos Sainz with his accident. So,
absolutely, they just didn't get it right at all. And Carlos's mistake was very uncanny. The temperatures here, you've got to get the tyres in absolutely the prime spot, and you're often finding that you're choosing where you want to use the tyre life. For example, do I gain more time out of sector 1 or do I gain more time out of sector 3? So in which case I'm going to have to deal with tyres that are not quite up to scratch in sector 1 and save them for sector 3, etc., or sector 2 for that matter. So it's very, very difficult here, and it's such stiff competition as well with McLaren and Red Bull.
There was an interesting moment after qualifying. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it was the first time I've heard Leclerc and Fred Vasseur contradict each other, because Leclerc said that there was an issue with the tyre blankets, and whereas Fred said, no, I don't think there was an issue with the tyre blankets, it's because he was sat in the pit lane. That's when the front tyres cooled off, and that's what caused him the problems. I hadn't heard that. I don't mean to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I'd never heard them disagree like that.
So I think they've had a chat, Tom, after that, because in the TV pen today, Charles Leclerc went out of his way to say it was his fault yesterday. So he said that he'd looked back on it, they'd talked about it, and he was like, he had made the mistakes, he had run wide, he hadn't got the tyres into the right condition for that lap. And actually, I thought it was significant. I hadn't even asked him about qualifying, and he threw that into an answer. So he was very, very keen to say it was his fault and not the team's. And actually that kind of built into a storyline of actually he feels pretty good now after this week, because they'd showed a pace that they could have fought for the win if they were in a better spot. And he has an understanding that it's a driver tweak that he's got to make. It's not like a fundamental thing with the car, which I put to him was what would be more worrying, right? But it's just that Charles got to get the job done. So we've seen him turn it around in qualifying before after a bad run. So I think it's interesting. But I would like to see how that dynamic evolves over time, because Charles hasn't been afraid this year. And I don't know if you felt the same about, saying how annoyed it is when things are going wrong and how the team are maybe not helping themselves when it's these little details, isn't it, that cost 2 or 3 spots on the grid.
Well, they're starting to gel as a team. I think they're making better decisions. Their strategy has been extremely impressive in comparison to years past. So I think they're also lifting as a team and trying to join the two teams at the front, being Red Bull and McLaren.
And a lot of that is down to Fred. This is only year 2 for him.
Yep.
So he is trying to pull this team together. He hasn't gone around firing everyone. He's really kind of quietly gone behind the scenes to get things done. He's never, even when Charles was criticising, he's never come out and said it. I know that they had differences of opinion yesterday.
I wouldn't say it was a criticism. It was just
it was difference of opinion,
yes,
wasn't
yeah.
it? I think so. I think they are gelling, and I think that is why they feel they've got a shot still at the Constructors' Championship, because I think they are starting to come together. So yeah, definitely not. I don't think there's any criticism there. I actually think they're maybe the most well-oiled Ferrari team that we've had for a long time.
Yeah, you're right.
And how
Lawrence.
exciting is that,
Yeah.
I think.
There is that element of, is this the second coming of the Jean Todt, Ross Brawn era?
Yes.
And you look at Fred and you see the wonderful sense of humour, you see the charisma, and you see that how that has a way of just cutting through pressure. In times where people are feeling like they're really under the gun, and then someone just cracks a joke in the garage, it's like, okay, it's just a bit of a reset. Let's just come back to it now, and it really just allows you to be confident in decisions. I think I think he's doing a really good
Fred
job.
really knows racing, and he knows racing drivers.
This is an excellent point.
Like few others, actually. I have a huge respect for him and everything he's done in his career in the junior formulas in particular, with ART and Lewis Hamilton in GP2, of course. Yep. But actually in Formula One, you know, even Alfa Romeo Sauber, okay, back of the grid. But there was something about that team that was making progress. Fred leaves, and since he's left, it really hasn't been stunning, has it? Now, I know they're in a transitional phase there with Audi coming in, but the performance isn't getting better, and I think a lot of that is down to the man. It all permeates down from the top, doesn't it?
I really don't think, Tom, that he's been given enough credit for that, the job that he did, that you just eloquently described, the job that he's done at Sauber. And now he's gone into the biggest job in sport, I think, at running Ferrari. Like, I honestly don't think there is a tougher job. And look, there's still a long way to go, but he's doing all of the right things. And that's quite a thing, isn't it, to step up from an independent team like Sauber to running a conglomerate like Ferrari and to take all the criticism that is coming his way. And there's been a fair bit this year, even though they're still in the Constructors' Championship. I think he's handling it super well, and I think that's a great point. He's just not getting enough credit for it.
Do we really think they're in it, the Constructors' Championship? It's 75 points now behind McLaren, the leaders. I know we've got 180 points on the board or whatever, but when you look at the pace that McLaren had here in Singapore and the pace they've had pretty much actually everywhere since the summer break, I think if Fred's being honest, he's not in it, but that's not how you lead a team, is it? You've got to be positive. It's all about positivity. I get that. I tell you what, though, do we think they're 34 points behind Red Bull? That is the one I think that he's gunning for. Ferrari to finish ahead of Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship would be a huge statement.
I think it'd be a huge statement, and I think it's all just building towards 2025. I think Fred's probably joined Ferrari and gone, okay, look, realistically, if I'm going to affect change, it's going to take me time. What's the year that I really want to make a move here? And we've seen that then with getting Lewis on board. We've seen them obviously try to get Adrian on board around that as well. And so, yes, they've got a bit of an uphill battle to be able to try and win the Constructors' Championships, but he just wants to continue the momentum into next year, because if he keeps that team the way it's trending at the moment, they are going to be forced to be reckoned with.
Right, I think we're coming on to what I call any other business. We've done the big teams. Look, what other performances stood out for you guys? I'm looking, down my result sheet. Alonso bringing that Aston Martin home P8, Hulkenberg P9, Perez P10. Why don't we do Aston Martin and Haas? I mean, Alonso, did that Aston deserve to finish P8 here?
I think probably not. I think I always love watching Fernando around this racetrack. You just see there's something about the walls that just makes him look fiery. I mean, even just watching the back of his car, with various other individuals trying to pass him, you can just see how dynamically he's thinking about the race, how much he's enjoying it. And when Fernando enjoys a race, that's when you just get a real racing car driver. He is just impressive to watch.
I think what's so impressive about Fernando is that every single session he's in the car, he's out driving it. He's doing what most other drivers probably couldn't do. This isn't a criticism of Lance Stroll, but there is a significant gap between them. And obviously Lance has talked about a lot of problems, doesn't feel comfortable in the car, can't get the right balance. I'm sure Fernando isn't happy with the car that he's got, but because he's a double world champion, because he is one of those generational talents, he's able to get more out of it. So I think he probably doesn't get the kind of credit that he deserves for a P8, because I know he aspires to way more than that, but it's significant. I think what is potentially frustrating for him is he had those glory days right at the beginning of the Aston Martin project of fighting for podiums consistently. Now he kind of feels like he's seen McLaren jump ahead of them, he's seen Ferrari pull away, he's seen Red Bull still quite far in Mercedes. He's probably thinking in the short term, when am I going to get a car like that again? Because he's obviously not getting any younger, which is why when I was talking to him in the TV pen, he was like, I know that a lot of the team are focusing on 2025, but we've got to look at 2024. Like, we've got to look at still making some progress this year, because they've still got to build some momentum. You can't kind of give up on this year, because I think it's tougher to then find your feet the next year.
Well, and he made that point in Hungary, actually. I remember he said, all I want is for us to find a direction with this car in the second half of 24 so that we can have a proper 25, but they haven't found the direction yet.
And that's how he can be the most help to Adrian Newey. Because Adrian's going to go in there, and there's so many people within that team that are ex-Red Bull that Adrian's going to be familiar with. He's going to be looking at this and going, fantastic, I know what they're capable of, I know what they're capable of. I just need someone to be able to help this translate the one aspect which is inherently unquantifiable, which is the driver, and how they feel, and what's the balance, and how much confidence it gives. I mean, that's the old plight of driver v engineer, and that relationship.
Right, second part of Any Other Business, Nico Hülkenberg. I mean, he actually came into this race a little bit on the back foot, I felt, because Ollie Behrman, the young gun who's coming in next year full-time, but actually beat him in Baku last weekend. I think he was probably feeling a little bit wounded by that. And my goodness, didn't he bounce back here? P6 on the grid, finishes the race a fighting P9. He kept them all behind him for lap after lap in the first stint. It was Hulk at his best.
Doesn't the paddock just get happy when the Hulk is back?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like the whole place just cheers for him. We want this man to get on the podium.
Is that a Hulk thing, or is that just because we love an underdog and it's Haas and...
No, I think it's because we all somehow know that he's just got a massive amount of talent, and we just want to see it recognised. And we've seen that he's done the hard yards. He's gone out of the sport. He's deputised. He's found his way back in magically, and you know, he's survived, and he's done it in an incredible fashion. So we know the talent's there. We just need the right set of circumstances.
This was exactly the kind of performance that will remind Ao Komatsu about why he was so irritated that he's lost Nico for next year. Because I think there was a bit of a delay in trying to, talk to Nico, sort it all out, and then obviously Audi came, and I'm not saying it would have changed his mind, but I think the Nico we've had in this spec since he's come back to the sport, I think every single person that Haas knows every time he goes out on the track, he's getting the most out of that package, and I'm pretty sure that's all any engineer ever wants. And I think that's why it's such a hole that he's going to leave behind. But today's a really good example of, he's dropped back a few spots from where he started, but that isn't a bad race. He still got the very best out of that package. He defended from a Red Bull. You know, he was really, really racy today, and I think he did a phenomenal job. And it's, and we've got all these rookies coming through, but he's one for the veterans who deserve to be here, right? Because that was a drive that deserves to be in Formula One.
Yeah, 37 years young. We've talked about Fernando Alonso, 43 years young. But why don't we talk about, lastly, the youngest driver on the grid? He was in his third Grand Prix, Franco Colapinto.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. You can't really look at this race in isolation, because I think everything he's done since he joined in Monza has been impressive. And perhaps one of the most impressive things was to have his moment, his little crash
in Baku.
And then bounce back.
Exactly.
No chance of his head dropping or anything. And then this weekend, such a hard race for mentally, physically, and he finished just outside the points, but very close to Alex Albon in qualifying. I can't praise the guy enough, I don't think.
That qualifying performance is, I think, what we will talk about for a long time. Look, Alex Albon, highly rated, rebuilt his career at Williams, considered to be going to give Carlos Sainz a run for his money next year when they're teammates. And this young kid's come in on 2 circuits he doesn't know, scored on the first circuit, second time he's got within thousandths of one of our highly rated drivers. And then today had that incredible, I know some drivers weren't too happy with what Alex described as a dive bomb move at the start, but he is putting his stall out, isn't he? Like, he wants to prove that he's deserved this chance in Formula One. Look, hats off to him. He has been, when you asked right at the beginning, like, what is top of any other business? I think this is top of any other business, because everyone is talking about Franco Colapinto.
I think a lot of team principal, he's given them a lot of a headache, just trying to think, all right, geez, how can we make use of this talent? I mean, if you look at Red Bull, Tom Clarkson. I feel like you have something to add to this.
I want to put a question to you two that I put to Juan Fosaroli, who ESPN, lives in Argentina, and obviously praised Franco a lot on the show last week. But, and I'm going to put this to you like I put it to him, if Carlos Sainz was still umming and ahhing and hadn't made up his decision about where he was going to drive for next year, now, with these 3 races under Franco's belt, he brings money to the team. Carlos Sainz costs money because, of course, he's a great driver, but he's expensive. Would James Vowles go, tell you what, my driver lineup for 2025 is Alex Albon and Franco Colapinto. Carlos, thanks, but I'm sorry, you've taken too long. Go and drive the Audi.
The one thing I always give Carlos an enormous amount of credit for, which I don't think he gets enough of it, is the effect that he has on a team. And if you see at every single team that he has been at, it has acted unbelievably harmoniously. You know, you look at the Lando Norris days with Carlos Sainz, even the Red Bull days with him at Max, Renault, etc., etc. He has allowed a team to gel. I think that is an incredibly important asset for James Vowles. I think it's enormously important because they are on a rebuilding journey where they need that union, they need that team working together.
But is Williams ready for a driver of Carlos's stature?
Yes, I think so, because I think they've got great leadership. I think they've got great. I mean,
Do
they're
they have
in
a
the
great
top
car?
10.
Are they going to have a car that warrants Carlos Sainz's talent next year, or actually are you putting unnecessary pressure on the people at Grove, and actually a young guy coming through in Franco Colapinto would just give them another year to rebuild, and it's sort of 26 that you want Carlos Sainz, I would argue.
It's an interesting question. I think they're relishing the opportunity to have someone like Carlos and Alex, because you've got two of the most experienced and capable drivers, particularly in a race trim, Lawrence. I think, for me, this seems like something that Williams, I think they would love to have.
I think so, and I think the very fact that James Vowles managed to convince him to come to the team, choose that over the Alpine project and the Sauber Audi project, will prove to the guys and girls at that team that Dalton, the owners, and James mean business. And I think that bringing a driver of that quality, whether or not it's too early or not, will have such a positive effect, or at least that's what James believes. But I think that what they're trying to do is on the weekends where they're struggling, they'll want drivers who can quickly work out what is wrong and how to find the right direction. And to build a little bit on Sam's point, Carlos is very good at getting the engineering team around him. So, the 3 or 4 people who are the closest to him, who will basically make the difference as to whether or not he has a good weekend. Talk to any team he's ever been to. That is the first thing I promise you they will tell you, is that he's able to become friends, get them working with them, whatever the language barrier. And I think that is what James is kind of buying. He's buying that kind of facility within Williams that Carlos can have that same effect. It's going to be super annoying that Colapinto is doing such a great job, because he's come through the Williams program, the driver academy, and you know what, if it was different and he had a seat available, I'm sure James would keep him, if he continues in this trajectory. But that's the beauty of Formula One, though, isn't it, in that you've got to stand by your decisions. In an alternate reality, if Carlos had said no and James Vowles had run out of time, I'm pretty sure he would have signed Valtteri Bottas, to be honest, because I think there was a contract in place. If Carlos didn't sign that, Valtteri was ready to go there. But I do take your point, Tom, that Colapinto has made it really difficult for James now, because he genuinely faces the prospect of not being on the grid next year, which is remarkable given how well he's doing this year and how great a talent he is.
I think the other thing is, I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out there, but would Franco be a good fit for Red Bull? I mean, if Christian is going out and saying, hey, I'd considered George Russell, why also wouldn't you look at Franco in many ways? Because you've got a driver who's done an unbelievable job in terms of deputising, much in the same way that Liam Lawson did. He opens up a new demographic, a new market in Argentina, which we haven't had in Formula One for a long time. And so in which case, if you really wanted to be ultra, looking at what am I going to do for the future, he's a very, very strong candidate.
That is a great curveball to throw
into. It's a great
Sam
curveball, Sam Power.
Because let's talk about Helmut Marko not bringing in Nick de Vries and not being so worried about going outside the pool but bringing young talent in. Why not do that? Why not, if Liam Lawson is coming in, then Liam Lawson is good enough to step up to Red Bull. You need to fill a seat. Look, Hadjar's doing a great job in F2, but Helmut Marko is not afraid of making the tough decisions, is he? And I think he will not want to miss out on a talent like Colapinto. Who knows? That's a really interesting take that I need to go and explore.
If Checo Perez doesn't close the gap to Max Verstappen and help them win the Constructors' Championship this year, and he's out at the end of the year, because there is speculation about that, Liam Lawson could step up to the big team. We're just telling Red Bull what to do here. Liam Lawson could step up alongside Max Verstappen, frees up a seat at V-Carb alongside Yuki Tsunoda. Franco Colapinto's in. Is that what we're saying?
I'm saying that now that Sam's raised it, it could happen. I think a lot
Stranger things have happened in Formula One.
But Red Bull never ignore great talent. And I think this is one of the great tenets of Red Bull, is that they spend so much money and effort in bringing people through their junior careers, and they have the best motorsport program in the world next to Porsche, in my opinion. And the price of that is that you've got to perform. So he's doing that. He's got everything behind him. I think, makes sense.
So the top 10 looked like this. Lando Norris took the 3rd win of his Formula One career, ahead of Max Verstappen in 2nd and Oscar Piastri in 3rd. George Russell finished where he started in 4th place, ahead of Leclerc in 5th and Hamilton in 6th. Then came the 2nd Ferrari of Sainz in 7th, ahead of Alonso 8th, Hülkenberg 9th and Perez in 10th. In the Drivers' Championship, Norris took 7 points out of Verstappen's lead to reduce the gap to 52 points. Leclerc is now 34 points behind Norris in 3rd and just 8 points ahead of Piastri in 4th. There's then a 47-point gap back to Sainz in 5th, with Hamilton 6th, Russell 7th, Perez 8th, Alonso 9th and Hülkenberg in 10th. McLaren have extended their lead over Red Bull Racing in the Constructors' Championship to 41 points, with Ferrari 75 points behind McLaren in 3rd. Mercedes are a lonely 4th on 329 points, with Aston Martin 5th on just 86. And then it gets close. VCarb are 6th on 34, Haas are 7th on 31, Williams are 8th on 16, Alpine are 9th on 13, and Sauber are still yet to score in 10th.
What a weekend. The Alpine driver is